WRCR Haverstraw, WRCR.com. Joining us now, as she does every Monday. At this time, it's Tina Traster, the editor of RCBizJournal.com. Good morning, Tina. How are you?
I'm okay. Good morning, Rockland County, on this rather soggy day.
It is a little soggy, but and it's not snow, which I do sorely miss. But yeah, it doesn't hurt to have a little bit of rain. You know, it's all good.
This is true. This is true. So speaking of rain, we're going to connect some dots today. In Clarkstown, so people might be aware of something known as the Grace Baptist Church site. And that was a site that became entangled in legal issues, and ultimately, back in 2020, Clarkstown purchased that site for $4.5 million. I think it's a little bit over three acres or so. And it's just kind of been sitting there and has not been redeveloped or there hasn't been a plan for it. We do know that over the last couple of years, Clarkstown has twice applied to the state for $1 million grant to try to get at least to get the buildings demolished, because now this is now town-owned, and so the fate of it is in their hands. And there's been this desire to get it demolished. So now, last week, the town council voted unanimously to get the grant process going a third time, maybe third time's the charm, and they intend to apply for a $1 million New York State grant under Restore New York Communities, basically to demolish the Grace Baptist Church and to make way for a 1-acre municipal parking lot and a sort of non-specific future mixed-use housing project that basically for now is theoretical. I don't know about the strength of the grant per se, but there is another, I think, wrinkle in this that's very, very interesting, and here is where we're going to connect the dots. The Grace Baptist Church is part of the TOD. That's the transit-oriented development around Nanuet. And they are, in applying for this grant, they're presuming that there's going to be some sort of a multifamily housing, mixed-use kind of development on that site. But the TOD, okay, and this is the key thing, the TOD was decided, what was passed by the town of Clarkstown with the same supermajority. It requires a supermajority for it to be altered. And the issue of supermajority is at the center and at the heart of George Homan's litigation over term limits. Okay, so George Homan's argument over term limits rests on the fact that the term limits law was never passed by referendum, and that a supermajority vote needs a referendum. And so the suit, which is now coming through the courts, and there's going to be a hearing next week. Not on the declaratory judgment, as he mentioned on the radio earlier this morning, that was incorrect. What's going to be heard in the next 10 days has to do with the conflict of whether the town or outside counsel can represent the town. So that's what's happening in 10 days. But back to this story. Basically, will this application become snagged by this litigation that is going to examine whether supermajority laws are illegal? In other words, in Clarkstown, the supermajority law applies to the TOD. It applies to the special permits for senior housing. It applies to the term limits. It's not specific to term limits. So if Judge Amy Puerto takes this, she's going to be looking at this matter, and she's going to be looking at an appeal from a different department, what's called the Fourth Department, where the supermajority law was struck, and she's going to have to apply the term limits case to that appeal, that argument. The question becomes, how does this affect all the laws in Clarkstown, or all the laws in Rockland County, or all the laws, for that matter, in New York State, that right now have a supermajority attached to them, that have not been, the point here is that have not been put on the books by way of a public referendum. So it's just interesting how something as seemingly unrelated and small as a town applying for a $1 million grant, you think that it's just about that, but I think that this kind of opens up a can of worms, in terms of how does this apply to the TOD law that was passed in 2019 that contains the provision for the supermajority, and every other law that contains a provision. Just as an aside, in case people want to remember this, the Nanuet TOD law was passed in 2019 and requires a supermajority to increase units from 500 to 750. And now, the interesting thing here is that the TOD has been massaged a few times, and this particular presumption that they have about this grant says that they would have a multi-family housing of up to 110 housing units on that property, on the remaining property. And from a careful read of the law as it stands right now, that won't be possible without some revisiting the law. So again, that ties back to the supermajority. I know this sounds very wonkish, but it's it's an issue that is relevant. It's people should be paying attention to these things because decisions are made that pertain to this. There's also another wrinkle in all of this, which is that there's still litigation surrounding the Grace Baptist Church with the Atiris Bias Yaakov Academy of Rockland. They last month filed an appeal against the town of Clarkstown and Supervisor George Homan and Coupon, and they are requesting that the appeals court overturn the district court's dismissal of the case. So if the buildings are raised through a grant, I guess they would just be entitled to compensation. But it's you can see how this kind of simple effort to get a grant to demolish a building kind of spins out in several directions and becomes a much more complex issue. Did everybody get that, or was that just too difficult to understand?
No, it's not too difficult to understand. It's still, there's a lot of open-ended things going on, so it's not as if there's any kind of conclusion we can draw yet from any of this, I don't think.
No, of course not.
Yeah.
What this does is it breaks open a bunch of questions. It's just that, the simple act of passing a resolution to apply for this grant, I think wasn't, when I was sitting in the town hall and they were going down a list of resolutions, and it instantly occurred to me that, wait a minute, this has some caveats here. This could open up some bigger questions. So we did some additional reporting, and the story is in today's edition of the publication, and you can look at it if you want to look at the details. But it's just it goes. I think what I'm really saying here is it goes to show you that this lawsuit over term limits, I think, is likely to radiate out a lot further or farther than just being about the term limits law, because of the implications of trying to attack the validity of the supermajority provision. And that is relevant to not just Clarkstown residents, but the whole county, because there is no doubt that there are probably other laws on the books around the county that have a supermajority provision, and so this judge is going to Amy Puerto is going to have to look at this, I think, within that context.
One other story, if you don't mind, I wanted to change gears real quick because we're running out of time.
Sure.
I know one of the stories you've been following very closely is the developments over at Hightor. I was wondering if there was anything up to update not only the status of that you've been able to find out with the status of any new buildings that are going to be built up in Haverstraw, or maybe not. Or the status of, I know that recently the current shelter signed a new 2-year agreement with Rockland Green. Anything going on with them over there?
Okay, well, it's funny because I guess a lot of that was going on over Christmas and then right after like New Year's, and so when each time I came on, I think I had missed the 2 radio shows, one that wasn't. So we haven't talked about that. We know that the Rockland Green, passed a resolution. When was this? I guess it was right before Christmas, to spend $225,000 taxpayer dollars simply to lease 427 Beach Road in Haverstraw, basically the empty warehouse, and that they are moving forward in a nearly $4 million purchase of that building. On top of that, a proper retrofit will be millions of dollars. I have heard Phillips say that it'll be a couple $1 million. Not if they're going to build a proper animal shelter.
And Tina, I'm sorry, I got to apologize because unfortunately we have to end it there. We can continue this next week because we do have another show coming on at 9:30. It's a show that revolves around Rockland County veterans.
It's called Thank You for Your Service.
Thank you for your service, and we're going to thank you for your service, and we're going to thank them for their service as well.
Can I just say one thing?
Real quick.
There are a lot of tremendously good changes going on right now at Hightor itself. And I will talk about that next week.
Okay, thank you so much. We'll talk to you then. It is 9:29. Stay tuned for Thank You for Your Service. This is the Morning Show with Jeff and Will. We'll be back tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. Have a great